Today we're back with Peter Wilkinson from the Alliance for Journalist Freedom. Welcome back, Peter.
Hi, how are you, Michael?
Good, thanks, Peter.
Good.
Recently, Hong Kong's Apple Daily was shut down. You want to talk us through that?
Well, it's part of China's strategy of repressing everything that's going on in Hong Kong. And as everybody will be aware, they began to become dramatic with the riots a number of years ago, and they've increasingly been repressing journalism. Back in the riots, strangely, while everybody knows that that was about the extradition bill legislation that Carrie Lam, the CEO, was trying to push through Parliament, and the demonstrations were against that. Back then, in the Communist Party mouthpieces, the papers in Beijing, they were actually saying that the demonstrations were to support that legislation instead of oppose it. And so this is just the closing of, or the arrest of Jimmy Lai, and then the hauling of Fong Kui Wong, the editor of the paper, off the plane on his way to Britain recently, is just further evidence of that. And it's essentially repression of press freedom. And as you know, China has no press freedom, or very limited press freedom. And we in Australia probably have the most press freedom in our region. And so we struggle very much with what's happening in Hong Kong, as do, as you know, most of the people who live in Hong Kong.
You said it was a dark day for journalistic freedom in Hong Kong. What makes this so bad?
Well, the issue is, as you know, today is the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party. And that would be, in Australia, if something like that was happening, if there was a 100th anniversary, journalists would be really reviewing the pros and cons of what had happened of the last 100 years. And there'd be a lot of debate. And in Australia, we've got people on the right and people on the left and people in the middle, and there's a lot of argument in the newspapers. That's not allowed, or that has been more or less stopped in Hong Kong. And hauling the editor of the Apple Daily off the plane on his way to London, and arresting a number of other journalists, is sending a very large message to journalists in Hong Kong: don't rock the boat on our day of celebration. So debate on the pros and cons of communism is not something to happen today.
I noticed they've also frozen all of the assets of Apple Daily as well as it arrested 5 of the executives. So it's a fairly stern warning, isn't it?
Yeah, look, there's a wonderful book by Peter Harcher, who's a very well-known journalist in Australia, Sydney Morning Herald, Red Zone, and it's really well worth a read for those who are interested in what's happening in China. He refers to something called the cabbage leaf strategy. And as you know, a cabbage is tightly bound with the leaves. And his research has revealed something the Chinese called the cabbage leaf strategy, which is they lay down one leaf, and then, which is a mild, in this case, form of repression, and then over the top of it, another layer and another layer, another. In Australia, we'd call the boiled frog syndrome.
Yep.
The plan clearly is to repress press freedom in Hong Kong, and then the suggestion is that the next step is Taiwan for them, and there is a strategy beyond that. And Peter Harcher talks about this being reprisals after what the Chinese government calls the century of humiliation, which really started with the Opium Wars way back. And this is China's opportunity to push their ideology into the areas surrounding. And I know that sounds very dark, but I do know that a number of people in high places in Canberra genuinely believe that, which is why the politicians in Canberra have taken quite a significant stand against what's happened in China, not just with press freedom, as you know, but with other forms of intimidation, the jailing of, or the imprisonment of Uyghurs and so on.
Given China's moves on Hong Kong's sovereignty, this was pretty much an inevitable move. Do you think it came as a surprise to anyone, or were they waiting for the other shoe to drop?
I think, well, no, I know that journalists in Hong Kong were hoping that the demonstrations would be the end of it. But outsiders who have followed this, people who, like Peter Hartchie, who've got a lot of wisdom on this and a lot of history, have seen this as just the next step in China's campaign. So, as you know, journalists are extremely important for keeping people in power in check, not just politicians, but businesses as well, anybody who's in power. And we've seen the pressure that the Australian government's been under right now. You know, I'm in house arrest, I'm in self-isolation in Sydney in the lockdown. And there's been a lot of debate, as you know, about the success or otherwise of the rollout of the vaccination program here. That would not happen in China. And so media is incredibly important, not just in a democracy, but in any society where there's a belief that the public has a right to know what's going on and where people can be held to account. So right through Asia, there are various forms of, not the democracy that Australia enjoys, but various forms of freedom and press freedom. And the least press freedom are places like China, North Korea, and so on. But then as we come south through Southeast Asia, there are various forms of press freedom. And Australia is held as a beacon of the strongest press freedom. And so, and the importance is that it allows us to enjoy the debates that we've been having that people in China simply cannot have.
Jimmy Lai faces some fairly serious charges as well now, don't they? Carrying some pretty hefty penalties.
Yeah. Well, again, the Chinese are renowned for jailing their opposition. So if I was a relative or close friend of Jimmy Lai, I think I'd be fairly concerned for his future and for his assets.
Yeah. All right, Peter, it was interesting to talk to you. One last go at Red Zone, written by?
Peter Hartchie.
Peter Hartchie?
He's amongst journalists, he's revered for the depth of his research. And the research in this book is fantastic. You needn't believe in all his extrapolations, his opinions, but the research is excellent. And so a lot of the work that's gone into this book is fact-based.
Great.
I don't know Peter, so I've got no I'm not pushing this because I'm a mate of his. I'm pushing it because it's a really good read for people who are interested in what's happening in China. And it's an easy read too.
And where do people find out more about you and your organisation, Peter?
The Alliance for Journalist Freedom, go to the website, journalistfreedom.com. We're easy to track down. If they Google me, Peter Wilkinson, they'll quickly get to the AJF. But the Alliance for Journalist Freedom, just Google it, will come up pretty quickly.
Great. There we go. Folks, Alliance for Journalist Freedom, China not doing the right thing. If we don't have a free media and a free press, no one gets held to account. The light never gets shone into the dark places.